Preston Crown Court this week that's cleared Lucas Neill. Now, this is a former West Ham United and also Australian captain player. This was a charge which would have seen him serve a 3-year prison sentence. Now, he was cleared this week. Neill had been accused of failing to declare assets after declaring bankruptcy. Now, he's one of the hundreds of ex-players who faced financial difficulties in recent years, an issue highlighted in today's Sunday Times newspaper. Joseph Kotrie-Monson of Mary Monson Solicitors was Lucas Neill's defence lawyer, and he joins us now. Joseph, thanks for giving us your time.
Good afternoon, Alexis. I must give some credit to counsel in the case, Robert Fitt, 33 Bedford Row, and my esteemed colleague, Sarah Longdon, who did a lot of the work on this case.
The story is quite an extraordinary story of Lucas Neill. Unfortunately, also, it's not unique. The PFA, the Professional Footballers Association, has warned that 10 to 20% of professional players go bankrupt. And these are also people that, these are not footballers that we haven't heard about. Wes Brown used to play for Manchester United, David James, England goalkeeper. These are people that have faced bankruptcy. Tell us a little bit more about Lucas's case.
Well, unlike some of the professionals, so-called professionals that Mr Neill met in the course of the last 7 or 8 years who've assisted in his downfall and taken many fees, I won't disclose the identities of some of the current and former football players that we are advising in similar circumstances. But I want to ask this question. We've heard the phrase, Alexis, the buck stops here. Where does the buck stop in regard of this type of mess? We had a situation in Mr Neill's case where he spent 80% of his money over a 15-year playing career on investments for his family. The rest, I think, has been advertised today, highlighted that he had a Ferrari for 2 years on lease. Yeah, fair enough. It represented 1.5% of his salary. This man did not, Alexis, fritter money away, and the rest went on family holidays for extended family because, of course, they all live on the other side of the world. There are grave questions raised. How was he prosecuted? How was it possible for all of these people to have access to him? No protection, it seems, from the clubs he was working at, just murky financial advisors there to take a fee, but not there when it came to advising him, completely over-leveraged, not in necessarily bad investments, but very badly diversified. But, how well are footballers protected is one thing, and how were these people given access and these hangers-on able to penetrate? Mr Neill, of course, paid a heavy price, but how was he prosecuted? Assets he wasn't even informed what he had. He went bankrupt for £700,000, not knowing he had an asset worth nearly £3 million offshore. He hadn't been advised, had matured. That is terrible. And for him not to be informed and therefore go bankrupt and then be prosecuted with the assistance of, sadly, Begbie's trainer, the trustees in bankruptcy, who'd seemed to not accept that a copy letter, unsigned, had never reached him, informing him of the existence of this. And, of course, the Insolvency Service, all of whom were very keen to publicise both his bankruptcy and, no doubt, or let's say perhaps we hope wouldn't have been the first had he been convicted of broadcasting it for their own PR.
I think it's important to say, and it's very well written in the article in the Sunday Times, that Lucas Neill accepts all responsibility here. He says, this is my fault.
Yes.
And I think that's an incredibly important part of the story. Does this open the question then, Joseph, that we have these players who at some point, sometimes very early on in their lives, are thrust in a situation where, their lifestyle might be fantastic, but they're earning a whole bunch of money, as you described. And again, people are not here to defend themselves, but plenty of people will attach themselves around a footballer and say, absolutely. Well, here are some ideas of what you can do with your money to prepare with your future. That A, those people are not controlled or vetted somehow, but B, that players are not given some form of official advice or education or looking after by their clubs.
Absolutely, Alexis. There's two phases to that, I would say. And there's one pre-bankruptcy and there's one post-bankruptcy, because everyone gets their fees on the way up and the way down. And clubs have clearly, at least not as far back as the early 2000s and the 2010s, in Mr Neill's case, been discharging, I think, their responsibility properly in that case. I have to say that the figures and the fees that are taken on the way down are simply ungratifying. How can it be the case that somebody goes bankrupt for £700,000 or £800,000 and millions after all the fees are taken from lawyers and from accountants, and all of these very necessary things are not sufficient for somebody to be discharged? Mr Neill is in a 7-year purgatory, financial purgatory, with no apparent end date in sight, as these fees continue. That cannot be fair. You know, there has been proactivity with regard to publicising his downfall on behalf of some of these professionals, albeit perhaps not realising the damage that was being incurred. But to this date, and we are asking, for example, the likes of the trustees in bankruptcy, Begbie's trainer, to sit down with us, explain with us where all this money went. They are a respected firm. Where's this money gone? And how long must this continue? As you say, national footballing hero in his country, captained them at the World Cup. He took responsibility for this because that's in his nature. That's why he was a great sports person, but it wasn't just his fault.
Okay. Joseph, I have to leave it there. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Joseph Kotrie-Monson of Monson Solicitors, who was Lucas Neill's defence lawyer.